the makers, the hackers, and the innovators, building the future of digital health. It's time to start the Digital Health Workbench podcast, hosted by Geoff McCleary. All right. Welcome, everyone. I'm your host, Geoff McCleary, and this is the Digital Health Workbench podcast. This is the podcast for digital health makers, breakers, and game changers, the people that architect, build, occasionally break, and are ultimately creating the future of digital health. Each month, we'll chat with a different industry leader. We'll talk about their digital health journey, what they're building now, what are the tools on their workbench that they'll use today and tomorrow. So with that in mind, my very first guest for our very first show is a longtime friend and former colleague. He's the CEO and co-founder of RecoveryPlus.Health, Mr. Peter Neme. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you, Geoff.
Our studio audience is excited.
They're going wild. Thank you, Geoff. It is truly great to see you and a privilege to be here.
Thank you. Well, I want to get into Recovery Plus, but before we do that, could you share a little bit about your background and your journey to digital health? A lot of people we know were not born into this industry, so it's usually a bit of a journey to get here. So, what was the personal and professional path that got you here?
Sure. And I absolutely was not born into digital health. So it is a very good question, as you well know, since we were, in fact, as you mentioned, colleagues. My background was in pharmaceutical marketing. So it was in healthcare, but on the marketing side of the table, on the agency side, on the media side, working with pharma and medical device brands. So I met a surgeon from China while at business school, probably 16, 17 years ago, and we hit it off. And he came to me just a few years back with an idea for closing a huge gap in health equity, which has to do with rehabilitation, chronic care rehabilitation, specifically for cardiac rehabilitation and pulmonary rehabilitation. This is a wildly underused, as I came to learn, as I dove into it, section of healthcare, specifically in rural areas or lower income areas. The access to this type of really life-saving treatment is woefully low. And as I spoke with him and the other founders, the other medical professionals who were working on a home-based solution to cardiac rehab, it became clear to me that while they were asking me to lead the company, which at first blush didn't make all that much sense, not being a healthcare professional. In fact, the real issues they had to do with marketing, had to do with awareness, and had to do with operations, really how to make it work, which is really what I have been doing for various clients for 40 odd years. So in fact, it did kind of work. And so here we are. We've partnered up. I've been working through the operational and logistical challenges of scaling access to cardiac rehab for the last 3-ish years.
Nice.
So yeah.
All right. Well, I know we've talked before about this. I like the model you guys have built at RecoveryPlus.Health. Can you share a little bit how it works and how you
Sure.
how you run that business?
Yeah. So as I said, the big issue with cardiac rehab is access. People don't go. There's a staggering number of people just simply don't go to cardiac rehab, even though it is very well known to reduce rehospitalizations, ER visits, and the ensuing, unfortunately, frequently ensuing ICU stays, right? Two of the most expensive parts of our healthcare system, right? ER visits and ICU stays, right? So the goal of cardiac and pulmonary and rehab and all of those is to lower those. Good for the payer, lowering costs, good for the patient, obviously, and good for the treating physician in that they have the cardiologists who refer patients into our system have healthier patients. So there are a number of challenges to this. The number one reason people don't go to cardiac rehab is that there aren't enough clinics, particularly in rural areas. They're too far away. So we set out to knock down these challenges. First of all, it's very clear that a scalable cardiac rehab solution has got to be something you can do from the most convenient location of all, at home. So we've come up with a home-based solution. We've built the technology that allows our exercise physiologists to treat and monitor their patients remotely.
Okay.
We were hatching this company over the course of late 2019 and into early 2020. So we all know what happened in early 2020. So the embracing of remote solutions suddenly went from, a nice, interesting sideline to absolute necessity for everyone.
Yeah.
So there are a number of other issues we set up to fix. The home-based part is one. We also want to financial costs are a big issue too. We are insurance-based, so getting licenses to practice medicine and bill insurance in all 50 states is a pretty massive bureaucratic undertaking. That continues to this day. We have to keep everything current. So we've done that. Simplifying the technology, another big part of what we do. A lot of our patients, of course, are older, so their ability to work with technology can be limited. So we've tried to make it as simple as possible. Push-button blood pressure cuffs that take your vital signs and automatically upload them, for example, into our EHR, have been a game changer for us. You just have to put the cuff on and hit start. That's it. We take care of the rest. Number one, now we have your vitals, and number two, if you don't take your blood pressure, we know, so we can call you and intervene and get adherence back on track. Nothing like a call from a cranky registered nurse to get adherence back on track.
Right. Keep you honest.
Exactly.
So in that stack, what did you guys have to go through from the digital standpoint to be able to get reimbursed for this solution?
Yeah, so it's without getting too much into the weeds of medical billing, there are huge limitations on what you can bill for cardiac rehab, particularly pre-pandemic. Telehealth sessions just weren't reimbursable at all. That changed. Congress loosened all of the telehealth reimbursement rules over the course of the last few years. This loosening is due to expire at the end of 2024, at the end of next year. So we're hopeful that our government will see the wisdom of the fact that telehealth or digital health, there is no telehealth or digital health in healthcare. It's just all healthcare. It's just another way to access your healthcare professional. You and I used to joke back in the day that there's no business and digital business. There's just business. Well,
just business.
Same thing. Same exact thing here. There's no telehealth or healthcare. There's just healthcare.
So if that reverts back, then does that what kind of challenges does that create for you guys? Do you have to change the way you're operating, or is kind of future-proofed a little bit for the way you've set it up?
Yeah, we are more future-proof than most because we did work to get around the limitations of cardiac rehab billing. We bill more like a remote patient monitoring company and a services company. We don't actually bill the cardiac rehab code. It's such a limited code. It applies to so few people. There are a bunch of things we'd like to change about it, right? Let it incorporate preventative care, not have a limit on the number of sessions that cardiac rehab. Just kind of counterintuitively, cardiac rehab, according to Medicare, it's 36 sessions long. So you go to a healthcare professional, you start going through therapy, you get better, and then they say, okay, that's it, you're done. Well, you're never done being healthy. You're never done exercising. You're never done with a lifestyle change. So it just doesn't make sense. So we've got a lot of workarounds that we put in place that allow us to treat for preventative care. We have a lot of our patients who would not qualify for cardiac rehab. They just have high risk factors. So I would say yes and no. We are somewhat future-proofed, more than most, but certainly it would be concerning if telehealth restrictions started come into force in just a little over a year's time. Would be bad for payers, bad for patients, and bad for providers such as us.
Yeah. Do you feel like they're going to keep that and kind of extend it, or do you think it'll go away?
I think it is a reach to just revert back to the pre-COVID attitudes towards telehealth, right? Patients have clearly embraced telehealth. It's very convenient, um, eliminates waiting in waiting rooms. If you don't need specialized equipment, there is no reason you can't have checkups with your doctor or other healthcare professional. Patients get it. Doctors, so that was a little bit of a nuance there. Doctors took a little bit longer to embrace it. They immediately recognized it was good for the patients, but there was some question about was it good for us? With the restricted telehealth billing codes, they were able. Doctors are business people too, right? They have to run their practices. So the fact that they are actually able to bill for telehealth sessions at a level comparable to in-person sessions drove the realization that, in fact, it makes them more efficient, then better able to treat their patients and run their practice.
Yeah.
And then there's the third, and the one we're talking about here. It's the payers. Medicare is recognizing that, in fact, telehealth sessions are a efficiency and a time saver. They're not a cost center. We are not a cost center. As I said, we're replacing ER visits and ICU stays with therapy sessions. The difference in cost of those is 2 orders of magnitude.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. We've seen, and I think you and I talked about this earlier at conferences like Health and others. There's a host of companies now kind of leaning in on that therapeutic specific care continuum and being able to kind of offload some of that specific treatment into these custom companies. I had the other question I had for you based on the conversation too is, as you got into this, you got more into the cardiac rehab. You started applying the digital tools, and you're collecting data, you're having these interactions. Like, I'm curious, what surprised you about, if anything, about what you were learning from the patients and the way they interact?
Sure. So I would say the first thing that surprised me was everything we just said, right? The narrow limit of cardiac rehab in Medicare Part B is so tightly defined, like to not make sense, right? There are, I talked about the session limits already. If you read the language, it's very narrow. It says cardiac rehab. Well, this type of approach, pulmonary rehab, long COVID treatment, there are several studies that have come out that have shown this type of exercise and nutrition-based therapy is significantly lowering remission rates in cancer and oncology patients. So the idea that you would limit who can apply this doesn't make sense. And in addition, cardiac rehab itself is defined as someone who had a heart attack or had heart surgery. So if you went to a traditional cardiac rehab center with risk factors or a family history or something, and wanting to avail yourself of this solution that can lower your risk of hospitalization from, say, 20% to 2%, that's widely proven, a traditional cardiac rehab center that bills in the traditional manner would have to say, sorry, we can't take you on. You'll have to come back after you get sicker. So a lot of these things are just like, are you like, what?
It's so counterintuitive.
It is. It's really, and as a layperson, right? And you and I have been on pharma strategy for many, many years, but we're lay people. We're on the marketing side, so just looking at it, it's like, the emperor has no clothes, right? Come on, guys, this is ridiculous. Yeah. There are 1.3 million people who qualify for cardiac rehab according to Medicare in the U.S. right every year. There are 6 million hospital visits due to heart events. So clearly, the data says you're missing a whole bunch of stuff.
Something's off there.
Right, you're missing a whole bunch of stuff. Most importantly, preventative care, right? Cardiac rehab is supposed to prevent a readmission. Well, how about we try to prevent the first hospital visit, right? Not the second one.
Right.
So that was that. Just the lack of usage was really staggering, right? Your doctor tells you have to go to this type of cardiac rehab treatment, and 80% of people don't. I mean, if my doctor told me you better do this or you might die. Sorry to be so blunt. I
that's
would darn sure do what he or she told me to do.
that's
And
usually
yet
the kicker.
it's a serious event, right? You've
Yeah.
had, I mean, and I certainly you come to understand it, right? People are fearful. That's why remote patient monitoring is so important. Probably the top thing we have to do is assure our patients that they're being monitored, they're being watched by a healthcare professional. If there's anything concerning, we will stop.
Yeah.
And that goes a long way from people who have had a negative health event and are really concerned that they're and are at risk of having another one, and which is the facts.
From the monitoring standpoint, what was the calculus there? Was it around do we build our own proprietary tools, or was there enough on the market to be able to put together? You talked about the blood pressure cuff and the
Sure.
connectivity in home. Like, was it all off the shelf? Were you able to? Did you have to build anything to go along with that?
So we don't build any hardware. The hardware is all integrated, whether it's cellular or Bluetooth. It's integrated. Our platforms are homegrown, and there are two parts. The patient app. There are two versions. There's kind of a free light version that patients can just download and get familiar with cardiac rehab on their own. And that's completely free, not freemium or anything like that. Just have at it. And then there's our platform that is used while you're in treatment. So your EP exercise physiologist is pushing your exercise program to you through the app. You're wearing a heart rate monitor while you exercise. And that's got all the video demos of the exercises, keeps the calendar up, and all of that. And then on the flip side, there's our EHR, which is homegrown and specific for this. Again, all the exercises are loaded in there. It's capturing all the data, and the EP can go in very quickly, see what their patients are doing when they last exercised. We integrate this with our referring doctors, right? Almost all of the people in our program are referred by their usually cardiologists, not only, but usually cardiologists at this point. And if there is some sort of issue that requires the doctor's intervention, we can quickly send them a message and let them know, right? The cardiologist remains the treating doctor in charge, so they can approve everything that we're doing and are alerted if there's anything that, if there's someone who needs to be called in for a visit,
Right.
we can let them know. So yeah, we've built the tech and all integrated, and we continue to refine and grow that out. And we'll touch on that a little bit more in next steps, which I'm sure is coming up next.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting kind of as you go through that. I think, part of, why I want to do this podcast is to understand kind of what are the tools you need to be successful, right? What sits on your workbench as the CEO? And sometimes you master them, sometimes they master you, or you have to kind of pivot and think about other things. Like for you in this journey and getting Recovery Plus to where it is, what were the critical tools for you to have?
Almost all of it centers around streamlining processes and automation, right? Because if you think about it, there are 250,000 people on cardiac rehab in the U.S. These are Medicare numbers, right? And our goal is not to add 10% to that or 5% to that, right? Our goal is to close that gap between people who should be on this type of care and people who are. So it's not thousands or tens of thousands; it's hundreds of thousands or even millions.
Yeah.
Right. We're still have a long way to go, but clearly you need to automate, right? You need to eliminate the geographic issues. You need to eliminate the cost issues. Done. And then you have to automate so that people can self-serve a lot more. So an EP, instead of being able to handle 100 patients, can handle 1,000. And so that's really the next generation of what we're doing, is making the platform more robust, more exercises, more self-service, more so you can just plug it in and go, like many great healthcare apps that are out there, focused on various exercise. And you think of the apps that runners use, right? You plug in your Garmin to Strava, and boom, it's capturing all your data and you're self-running.
Yep.
We're never going to be quite that automated, but it's really how can you automate and make it easier and easier for people to get in. Because again, we don't just want incremental scale here. There's a fundamental health inequity that we're trying to solve. And it's not a few thousand people who should be on this type of treatment. It is millions.
Yeah.
And that's not going to be solved through traditional means. It's not possible.
So what does success look like in that model for you guys then, as you look at the going from thousands to millions, like where does what's the next version of, hey, we think we've, you can lean back in the chair and go, okay, major milestone hit, we've done X. And then, what does that look like beyond that as well?
So it becomes the first step is just getting more and more exercise physiologists working with us, trained on staff, delivering treatment. Doing that, hiring them as quickly as we can. The next level is starting to automate that. So an exercise physiologist can come, join our platform, get whatever training they need. There are 18,000 exercise physiologists in this country. So I guess under one scenario, you could see hiring a lot of them or all of them. That's not really the goal. The goal is just enable them to be able to deliver this type of care. And then on the flip side of that, another part of success would be awareness among patients. Here's a place where you can come, you can register, you can learn about cardiac rehab, you can experience it for yourself, you can see what the exercises look like, demystify it, take the fear away, and then connect those patients with an EP, almost to become a clearinghouse for the providers and the people in need of care, and just connecting them and automating the treatment. And that is where we're heading with this, and that's where you start to really attain scale, because it's not so labor intensive. We don't have to employ all the EPs and train them and all of that. They can just do the work on their own, and the patients can become, which they are not now. We have an onboarding process. A patient joins us. We have to collect all of their data and get them into our medical practice. We want to make it much more self-service and a much more seamless connection.
Right. And we a lot of talk in the industry as well about kind of health data standardization and where being able to collaborate with that data. It's still a system where it's really the patient that's portable, not the data. So how have you kind of gotten past some of those challenges? Are you exporting? Are you working with other data systems to be able to kind of augment the view that you have of patients and what needs to be done? Or is that truly all in-house and then gets fed back into whatever provider systems you're working with?
So really important kind of like next generation question with all of the talk about artificial intelligence in healthcare. The two places where it really can make a difference in our little niche, our healthcare niche. One is on the individual patient, just being able to analyze the patient data and suggest courses, treatment programs. We're working on that now. We have the first generation of that in place, and really want to be able to build that out so a patient can be quickly onboarded, analyzed, have a treatment plan sent to their exercise physiologist, who simply has to review it, approve it, and push it out to them. On the patient data side, so that's really intriguing, because there is a huge opportunity to analyze population data and start to look at what are the risk factors in aggregate, and then apply that to the individuals. So real opportunity to learn that. We are running our own EHR, so we are running our own capturing and maintaining our own data. But certainly you make a important point in that integrating with other providers and just really aggregating the data and analyzing the population risk factors is a critical next step. And important to this, we're a relatively young company, and so of course I'll get the questions from investors like, who's your competition? And of course, there are, so I'm not going to be naive and say there aren't, but strategically there aren't. The goal is to broaden access to cardiac rehab. And if someone is doing it alongside of us, good for them. If someone's doing it better than us, good for them. Shame on us. But we should all be recognizing that there is a shared goal. Lack of treatment is the problem, right? In the traditional telehealth marketplace, right, you have the option to see your doctor via a telehealth session or go see your doctor in person. It's a choice. You have an option, right? Fantastic. In our world, people simply don't go at all. There is no choice, right? The people that we say are not going to cardiac rehab at all. So it's telehealth or nothing. It's a digital solution or nothing. It's a home-based solution or nothing and a high risk of rehospitalization. So yeah, that being able to partner with other providers, recognize that this is a shared mission, and that would be a really nirvana moment to really be able to get there and share all of this data and sophisticated data tools sitting on top of it to analyze risk factors and make for a healthier population. Yeah. Which again, I keep coming back to, can you really move that needle? It's not about adding 10 patients or 100 patients. Right. It's a matter of analyzing and proposing a healthier approach for millions.
And does that come? Does the proof of that work? I mean, obviously, it's there in the data that you have. You treat that like real world evidence. Is there a thought that this becomes a clinical trial at some point, or these patients are allowed to have access to, or maybe the clinical trial groups that might have access to the patients? Like, is that a consideration for you, or does it operate solely on how you've set it up now?
No, it's absolutely. There's certainly plenty of clinical research that validates that cardiac rehab works. It's safe, and it lowers hospitalization rates, readmission rates dramatically, right, by 90%, right? We just finished a study that's just data closing is happening now. We'll probably publish in January. That was really the first completely home-based cardiac rehab study. We used our app. It was an 80-person trial. I think it ended up being 72 people. They're just wrapping up the data now. But yeah, absolutely, that will show. Not to get ahead of the data being published, but that will show, one, that home-based treatment is safe. Of course, that's number one. We had no hospital admissions during the trial. Two, that it works, that you can deliver the protocol as effectively as in person. We will show that as well. And then there's going to be a third component to that, where those two things being held equal, in a home-based treatment, adherence skyrockets. And as you well know, when your adherence to any medical treatment goes up, success goes up, health goes up. So absolutely, that was really just our first stab into clinical research, and would love to as the next year, as 2024 rolls around, take that to the next level and do broader based studies with bigger groups, and exactly what you're talking about, start to collaborate. This was our trial run by our people with using our patients, validated the process, have a good publishable study. What's next? How do you take that to the next level? And I think you hit it exactly right.
Yeah, and that's fantastic data. So I'm looking forward to to when you guys publish. I think that'll be great news. The other thing as we kind of get to the end of this here is based on everything you've gone through, kind of what you see happening with cardiac rehab and the tools that you're using. What's the future of digital health look like for you? What are the big projects that will be built or need to be built next as we think about this space and we think about what's evolving and growing in the industry?
So just as one observation, obviously we're in our kind of small niche. there are so many great solutions out there, and it's so unbelievably fragmented, right? What we're talking about in our own platform, right, is we're just talking about it earlier today. It's how can we introduce nutrition data, right? Cardiac rehab is traditionally it's exercise therapy, and most of what we do is exercise therapy. We also have a couple of a dietitian and nutritionist on staff because right, diet and exercise, it's peas and carrots, right? Diet and exercise. And then the third part clearly is the mental health, is the mental aspect. A lot of greater awareness. Very happy to see the awareness of the importance of mental health. Many prominent celebrity athletes have come out and really spoken about that very, very eloquently.
Yep.
Michael Phelps, Simone Biles. We can roll out all of the names. The tennis player Naomi Osaka was just so forthright about their own issues, right? And when you talk about our patient population, people who are at risk, of course, the correlation of having had a negative heart event and depression is, as you would suspect, very, very strong. So how can we start to turn this into a holistic system? We can treat a part, then you add nutrition to the exercise therapy, you're going to get even better. Then mental health, that's our next challenge, because if we can get those three really working together, we will really start to address the whole cardiac pulmonary rehabilitation treatment. But it's addressing those fragmentation issues, recognizing that this is not a competition. Population health is a shared mission that everyone benefits from. And there are, as we all know, huge issues with our healthcare system that I think we can start to address, right? Number one healthcare spender in the world, 27th in actual health measures. So there's something wrong there, as you and I both know and have both discussed it at length. And that eliminating that fragmentation and inefficiency, well, not eliminating, but recognizing it and working towards shared solutions.
Yeah.
And this includes treaters, patients, and of course, the very important Medicare and the independent payers.
Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think I think we're just at the beginning of picking away at the little pieces all around the exterior that can individually be addressed, but we've really got to figure out a way to work better together and combine solutions to come up with even greater holistic approaches to a lot of these conditions. Mental health obviously is a really important one. Cardiac rehab, obviously another one as well. I think there's a lot of work that can be done there.
Exactly. There are a lot of great people working on it and thinking about it, but clearly the fragmentation in our healthcare system is a problem, and the access to care of patients is just a huge issue, and it is, health inequity is, as we've talked many times, it is the people who need this kind of critical care the most are usually the ones who are least able to access it.
Yeah.
So really going after that, recognizing that the rural areas and the lower
the most help getting it.
Overlay ethnicity, and suddenly, that 20% usage of cardiac rehab, which is scary to begin with, becomes 8.
Right. Yeah. Well, listen, that's all the time we have for this month, but I really want to thank you, Peter. I can't thank you enough for joining today, being my guinea pig on the first podcast, and for sharing the story and the amazing work you guys are doing at RecoveryPlus.Health. I want to thank everybody else for joining in. Hopefully you found us, and that there's something from this call and from what Peter was saying that gives you another tool or two that you can add to your own digital health workbench. So with that, I want to say thank you, Peter, and thanks to everybody for joining. We'll catch you next month.
Thanks, Geoff. Great to be here.
Thanks, Peter.